So having now done a ton of PSP content on the channel, I'm finally ready to switch gears to my latest handheld obsession, and that is this guy right here, the Steam Deck, which is, as you can see, an absolute behemoth. Now, I'm not going to do a full review right now because honestly I just haven't spent enough time with it yet. It's been about 2 weeks, I think, that I've been messing around with the Steam Deck. But what I can do is give my first impressions of it, and then later on I'll start to do more videos on it about, like the games that I'm choosing for it, or a full-blown review after I feel like I've really put the thing through its paces. But today is all about first impressions, and honestly, my first impressions are that it is both great and also kind of frustrating. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the stuff that's absolutely wonderful about the device, and then I'll talk about some of the things that's been a little bit more frustrating, and then some of the other videos that I'll be working on after I'm done with the impressions piece and leading up to a full-blown review of the Steam Deck. But for now, the wonderful stuff. And I think the best place to start with that, honestly, is the hardware. Now, initially I was skeptical about the Steam Deck for more than a few reasons. For starters, again, the thing is absolutely gigantic. But I would say it's not unmanageably gigantic, and what I mean by that is, like the Nintendo Switch, for example, right? You could make the argument that's fairly large for a handheld, and that would be true even if you're talking about the Switch Lite. But really, what the Steam Deck feels like in hand is not too dissimilar to using something like the Hori SplitPad Pro with the Nintendo Switch. Although the thing that I really like about it is it feels a lot more solid than the Switch does with its Joy-Cons. Because those are detachable, and the fact that you've got the controllers just directly connected and built into the device itself, it feels a lot more solid in the hand. Now, when I say solid, it's also a very weighty device. I think this thing weighs about a pound and a half. I think somebody said that if you actually have the Nintendo Switch and the Vita, that's about how much the Steam Deck weighs. But despite the fact that it's kind of this big, beefy boy, it's not really that uncomfortable to use, and that was really surprising to me. I kind of expected that with it being such a heavy device that my hands would just sort of get tired, or it would be a really annoying system to hold for long periods of time, but that really hasn't been the case, and I really think the reason for that is that the weight's just fairly well distributed because it's such a wide device. It doesn't feel like all that weight's just on one side or the other, and the whole experience just feels really, really comfortable. Now, just because holding it is comfortable doesn't necessarily mean it's got the best buttons. I realize that, but I'm happy to report that as far as I can tell so far, the buttons feel really great on this thing. I was especially skeptical about the idea of having the D-pad and the face buttons so close to the edge of the system because I thought that would be really unnatural given what I'm used to with, say a standard Xbox controller or a DualSense or something like that. But it actually doesn't really feel weird at all. And in fact, I would argue it's probably a good thing because whenever you're trying to reach the face buttons from the right analog stick or from the D-pad back to the analog stick, it's actually a really short distance. The only thing that's kind of weird is I'm so used to like going up or down to get to the D-pad from a stick that it was kind of weird to just go like right to the left. And the feel of the buttons is great too. The D-pad feels pretty much best in class, as good as any first-party controller that I've ever used that had a competent D-pad on it. And the face buttons aren't too mushy, they're not too stiff, they just strike that really good balance of tactile response. But aside from just the regular face buttons that you would expect, there are also some other really nice surprises on the Steam Deck that worked a lot better than I thought they would. For starters, there are 2 sets of rear paddles, which is something you would find on like the Xbox Elite controller or on a SCUF controller. But here, the only thing that was weird to me is they are really hard to press, which at first I thought would be annoying because, what's the point of having them if they're going to be difficult to activate? But they're not so difficult that it can't be done. And that's actually kind of nice because there have been a lot of times when I'm using a SCUF controller or if I'm using like an Xbox Elite controller that I would accidentally hit the rear paddles when I didn't mean to. So the fact that they take a little bit more force to activate is kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess. But yeah, I'll probably have to spend some more time with games that actually, benefit tremendously from using rear paddles before I can really say anything definitive about it. But at least at a glance, I can appreciate their placement and it's very comfortable to get to everything. And again, in the hand, it's just a very comfortable feeling for the controller on either side just because it's not super slim like the Nintendo Switch is. It's not overly huge. It's just a nice middle ground. Like the thing feels a lot better than I was expecting it to. Now the touchscreen's a little more iffy. I think it's a 1200 by 800 resolution if I remember correctly, and it is technically a touchscreen, but I will say that the responsiveness of the touchscreen does not feel as good to me as it does on the Switch. I feel like I get a lot of like mistaps whenever I'm trying to interact with elements on screen. It's rare that I have to do that, but every now and then if there's an option that pops up, particularly in a game that you can tell it feels like it's running on a PC when in fact it's really running on more of a console-like experience for this particular handheld. You might want to just tap an on-screen element, and I feel like some of those don't register correctly. Maybe that's something they could fix in a later firmware update, I'm not sure, but it was something that I was a little bit surprised by because I kind of figured, it would be on par with the Switch or something like that. Not like a smartphone or a tablet necessarily, not like that level of accuracy, but a little bit better than what I got out of it. But again, that might be something that could be fixed in a future firmware update or something like that. Now let's talk about software a little bit. Theoretically, this system just launched with the largest video game library of any system launch ever, because you have access to thousands upon thousands of Steam games. but with some caveats, right? Because not every game is going to run perfectly well on the Steam Deck. Now, to be fair, Valve has done a good job of starting to categorize games in terms of, those that are verified, meaning they work pretty much flawlessly on the unit, those that are listed as playable, where they might have weird little problems like, maybe interface text is too small, or you'll have to do some remapping? Nope, that's not right. Some remapping of the controls to get an optimal experience, or you might have to change the screen resolution to, just make sure that it matches the native display that you have access to in the Steam Deck. Just weird little configuration changes you would probably have to make to get the best experience. Then they have ones that are just not supported, which is weird because some of the games that I found that were not supported are definitely playable, and I feel like they should have been categorized as such, but then again, we're talking about thousands of games that ostensibly have to be kind of rifled through by Valve to make sure they understand what's compatible and what's not. And then finally, you have those that they just list as unknown, right? Games that they think might work, and in my experience with a lot of those games, it seems like they did in fact work, but they just haven't done enough testing on them to really say definitively, yes, this is how this game should be categorized. But I would say most of my experience playing it these past couple of weeks has been positive in that most of the games that I fired up worked without issue, or just minor changes that I had to make in order to make sure that, it was the best experience that I could get in this particular form factor. Now, as far as actually navigating the device, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say. It definitely feels like they still have some kinks to iron out here. I would have weird situations where if I docked it, the screen resolution would not be recognized correctly, so the interface would be sort of distorted in dock mode for some reason, and then it seemed to clear up later on, so I'm not sure if that's something that they're still working on. By and large, I would say that the interface, sort of the thing that you need to get to those gameplay experiences in the first place, is perfectly adequate, right? It's easy to navigate, it's easy to understand, it's quick to, make new collections of games using the Steam interface. Now, as far as going into desktop mode, that's a different beast entirely. If you want to actually just use this thing as a PC, that's kind of weird. I've only messed around with it a little bit, long enough to manage some files and do some tricky emulation stuff that I've been testing so far. But yeah, I probably won't do a deep dive into that. All I will say is that it's perfectly functional, right? If you want to use this as a PC, at least for basic point and click operations, launch a web browser, check email, download new applications from the App Store, all that stuff is perfectly fine. I'm sure I will run into weirder things with it, but we'll get to that in a minute when I get to the frustrations part. But for now, I would just say that the software by and large is great on the Steam Deck, and it's delivering exactly what it said it would. And something else that I really like about the Steam Deck, aside from just, again, the feel of the hardware, the native selection of games, the smoothness with which I can navigate the interface for, just getting to those games, is it's really flexible. Even games that kind of exist outside of that Steam library purview are pretty easy to get running. And at this point, I can say that I've managed to get Game Pass running on it. I've managed to get homebrew applications, which were like some fan-created games, like somebody did TMNT Rescue Palooza. I was able to get that running on Proton on the Steam Deck. I've been able to get emulation running on the Steam Deck. Really, there's just a ton of flexibility, right? I think some of what you lose in that streamlined experience from a console from Sony or Nintendo or Microsoft, what you gain is that flexibility, right? So if you are somebody who enjoys tinkering, it's going to give you, just a wealth of options of how you want to get different games and experiences onto this thing, or just full-blown software if you want to use it in desktop mode. But that's also kind of the place where I would pivot into some of the frustrations of the device, because it's hardly been flawless, and there's definitely been some weird stuff that I've run into so far. And for starters, get ready to do a lot of Googling, because if you want to start doing weird stuff that's kind of outside, just the standard launching of native Steam games, then you're definitely going to run into some weird situations where you're going to have to lean on somebody else who's already accomplished what you're trying to do, whether that's you exploring emulation or trying to get a specific game to run that wasn't really designed to run on the Steam Deck. You'll spend a lot of time looking through forum posts and searching through Twitter and Reddit and YouTube trying to find answers to those questions. So if you're somebody who likes to tinker, that's not going to bother you at all. But if you're somebody who really just wants a quick pick up and play device and everything's just perfect, 99% of the time, this is not the device that's going to do that. A Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation or something that would do that. You have to remember, this whole thing is just a PC that's been shoehorned into a handheld form factor. So there are going to be bugs, there are going to be glitches, and you should absolutely be, just completely prepared for that. And on the subject of it being a full-blown PC, yes, you can use it in docked mode. You can get an off-the-shelf USB-C dock that has things like an HDMI output, Ethernet, USB-A and A ports, and an extra C port, pass-through charging, and you can dock this thing up and use it with a computer monitor or a TV. But be ready, because it's not a seamless experience by any stretch of the imagination. For starters, like I mentioned earlier, I did have like interface problems when I initially docked it, where it just wasn't displaying properly. Then I also found that you can't really just like plug the dock in and have everything instantly transferred to a display or a TV monitor. For me, I had to put the system into sleep mode first, then bring it back on, whether that was in desktop mode or game mode, and then it would sort of display things properly. But yeah, it's not like plug and play or drop in and drop out like you might be used to with a Switch and a Switch dock. You know, it just does not do that smoothly. I'm hopeful that it will get to that place where it is smoother, and maybe whenever, you know, Valve actually releases the official dock for the Steam Deck, it'll be able to do that in a much smoother way. But ultimately right now, if you're expecting like, oh, I'm just gonna drop in the dock mode for a little bit and play some Yakuza there, you'll get there, but you will probably run into some issues, either with the display not coming up correctly, or you might have problems with it recognizing, depending on the game you're playing, if it will recognize a third-party controller that you've paired with it. Speaking of, that's another kind of hiccup that I ran into, as I was trying to just, you know, use a standard Xbox One controller with it, and I was able to get it to work, but first I had to do a firmware update on the controller through my Xbox itself, and then put it back into pairing mode to work, and then even then, there were some games that just would not recognize it until I either backed out to the main interface and said, hey, don't use the Steam Deck controls, actually use this third-party controller that I've, you know, paired through Bluetooth, and then it was able to work. Again, not the smoothest experience if you want to go for dock mode. Now, if you're staying predominantly in handheld mode, you're probably going to have a much easier time, and that's generally the way that I've played it the most. But something else to be aware of, if you're like banking on that docked experience, probably going to take a while before that gets refined further. And something else that's going to be frustrating is the battery life, because even though, yes, you can absolutely play a game like Horizon Zero Dawn and have gorgeous graphics on that screen, and it's kind of a magical thing, honestly, to play, you know, a big, beefy AAA game like that in the palm of your hand, you're only going to be able to do it for maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and that's really highly dependent on what settings you choose, whether you're going to do like a, you know, 30 frames per second, or if you're going to do 60 frames, you know, how many graphical effects that you have enabled through the interface for each, you know, individual game. Your battery life will vary tremendously. Now, if you're playing older games on the system, which I've been doing a lot of, and I'm going to make a video just about the older games I've been playing on this, you can get, you know, 5 to 7 hours of play, which is awesome. But if you're, you know, looking to play something like an Elden Ring or Days Gone or Horizon Zero Dawn or Forza or any of those games that are just like, you know, graphical showcases or are really going to tax the system significantly, you know, you're not going to be playing this thing for like 5 hours. It's just going to just drain battery life like crazy. So that might be good for you. I've actually enjoyed that to some degree, which sounds weird to say, just because it keeps me from staying glued to the Steam Deck for like 6 hours at a time, and, you know, make sure that I still, you know, go work and do responsible things. But yeah, something else to be aware of is, you know, if you're going to play those really big taxing games, you're not going to be able to do it for very long, again, unless, you know, you're able to supplement the power consumption somehow. So all that being said, do I think the Steam Deck's worth it? Maybe. That's something I really need to explore further in a review. My first instinct is that if you're somebody who already has like a massive Steam library, yeah, it's probably going to be a good buy, especially if you like the handheld form factor. But again, I just need to spend more time with it at this point. But what I can say is, for me personally, I don't regret buying it in the least. And that's the thing, I was skeptical about buying it. You know, a while back I did a video on this channel talking about how I thought the Steam Deck was probably worth it, and when I actually got the ability to make the purchase, I almost didn't do it. I was very close to not buying the Steam Deck, because I was like, you know, am I really gonna spend that much time with it? It looks pretty bulky, like, you know, is it gonna be comfortable to play for long periods of time? And, you know, all of the hesitations that I had, or the things that I was most worried about, turned out to not be very big issues at all, and I've been having a blast with the Steam Deck so far. Again, something I want to expand on in a much bigger way whenever I get to do like a full review on it. But for now, you know, some of the videos that are coming up are, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, what it's like playing older games on the system. I'll be talking about some of the games I bought specifically for the Steam Deck, some of the accessories that I recommend for the Steam Deck based on my time with it over the past couple of weeks, so be looking out for that. But yeah, what do you think about the Steam Deck? You know, is it something that, you know, did you pre-order one, or is it one you're planning to get? Are you going to wait till like they do a future revision, which I would expect will be on the way in the next couple of years? You know, let me know your thoughts below. Would love to hear your feedback. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video, and if you have any, you know, questions about the Steam Deck that I didn't answer here, you know, let me know down there and I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, have an awesome day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.